Hey everybody, and thank you for joining us on this presentation. Today we're going to be speaking about AI indoctrination and data ethics. We're joined by Kevin Collins, he's the CEO and co-founder of Charlie AI, as well as Elham Alipour, who's the chief scientist here at Charlie AI. Kevin, Elham, thanks for joining us. I'm really excited to dive into this topic with you.
We're looking forward to it. Thanks, Patrick.
Now,
Same here.
there's a lot of really exciting things for us to discuss and to cover today. Primarily the topic of just AI security, AI ethics as it relates to the data that's used and the responses that we get in AI. And really, this all kind of came from one core question that we hear all the time. We hear it in the media, we hear it in the news, we hear it on Twitter, right? Anywhere people are talking about AI, we hear, can I trust what AI is telling me? That's a big question. And I think there's a big answer to it. I want to let maybe Elham maybe jump in here and maybe tell us, what are you thinking about the topic of can you trust what AI is telling us?
When I see like a question like this one, like the first question that comes to my mind is, what do you mean by trust? Like it means different thing from different point of views. Some people only can trust it if the accuracy of the result is higher than the level. For other people, it means that like the result should be unbiased. For other people, it means that like, oh, I have to make sure that the data that I'm using is private and secure. So it means different things for different people. But at the end of the day, there should be some way that we can define it, and then we can come up to the answer that, can I trust what AI is telling me? And it really comes back to, so what type of AI are you using?
I would agree with what Elham had said. For me, when this question comes up, it depends. And it depends on who put the AI together. Do you trust them? Do you trust their intents and their motives? There's a lot of elements that go into building the models that become what people refer to as the AI. And that building, people can bias it for their own intents and purposes. They might not be focused on the accuracy, as Elham pointed out. It really does depend on who is doing it and why they're doing it and how they're doing it. I think a bigger question is, can you build AI that you can trust? And the short answer to that is yes, definitely you can.
Yes, I agree.
What are some of the core principles of building an AI platform that you can trust? You had already mentioned, can you trust the developer, right, or the person that's using it? What other principles are something that we need to keep in mind?
Data, I would say, like, is one of the most important part of it. Like any AI model is as good as the data that it was trained on. If the data, for example, is biased, then like the result of that model is going to be biased. Like it's going to mimic whatever you feed as training data.
You know, a lot of people don't grasp the importance around data. It's all about the models, and you hear that from the hype. It's all about the model this, the model that. The reality behind it is data is the lifeblood of these models. And you really have to know how to use that data effectively. But there's other elements to it as well. Similar to how humans have to rely on multiple data points to make an informed decision that is based on facts. You have to develop that same mentality into the AI models. And it's part of the reason that you see competing designs around the single model approach versus the 1,000 brains. We fundamentally believe that the 1,000 brains is needed because you have to have effective use of the data in order to create data points. You have to be able to look at them objectively, not subjectively. The AI models have to do that similar to how humans would have to do.
That makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that I know we consider quite often at Charlie is, I'm going to advance the slide here, it's the core principles of just AI ethics. Let's talk through some of these because these core principles really drive a lot of the decisions that we're making around product development, around implementation of AI for specific tasks within the enterprise. And it's one of the things that really I think is what's driving the Charlie AI Antius platform to be one of these trusted AI platforms that is built with humans in mind, not just with creating amazing technology in mind.
Definitely. I mean, if we look at some of those core principles, the first one is transparency. You have to know how these models, and I'm not going to say model, I'm purposely saying models, are making their decisions. What did they base the data or the decision on? What data was fed into these models? How were they trained? Can they explain why they came to a conclusion that they did? You need to be able to show that transparency. And that's going to come in later when we start to talk about the importance of validating the models before they go into production, for example, so that you can test it, you can validate it, you can verify it. There has to be a sense of transparency end to end, not just in the building of the model, but in the operation and the testing as well.
Point number 2 is really interesting to me. This is something, a callback to just a moment ago with Elham talking about bias and making sure that the data is not biased. So let's speak about fairness. When we're developing our products, how are we considering fairness and how are we considering that the data is trustworthy in and of itself?
So again, like the data itself, the training data that we use to train these models, like we have to make sure that it's unbiased. Like for example, if you are just training a general purpose foundational models on all the training data set that is available on the internet, that is going to be biased. Like there are so many contents on the internet that is a biased data set. So you have to first, like the first approach is just to make sure that your training data is really unbiased. And then after that, you have to look into, as Kevin was saying, that you have to make sure that in testing, you can also figure out exactly what are the scenarios that your model is making a mistake and have that human feedback loop in place to update it, to teach new values for the models. The other thing is like the definition of bias and this type of policies are an evolving definitions, like something that might have thought to be okay like 10 years ago, it's not okay these days. So you have to make sure that your model is also able to dynamically learn new concepts and learn from, like, again, the human feedback loops that we have in place. So it's dynamic, not static.
I think that's one key thing is the dynamic element. And that one is not discussed enough. Because if you're looking to avoid bias, you have to have some type of method to continuously update to eliminate bias. So there's the continuous learning, the dynamic learning elements. Now, if we look at what's in the market today, and this could be a bit contentious, the models are more of a programming technique, very advanced, very sophisticated, but they're taking a set of data and they're producing outcomes based on that knowledge base. That's fixed in time, it's fixed based on the data that was fed into it. But as humans continuously learn, that dynamic learning, we're updating our knowledge. We're updating our ability to generate new outcomes based on new facts, new things that we have learned. So you have to build in this dynamic learning capability into the models. And I think that's critically important if you want to start to mitigate bias. I'm not going to say avoid or completely eliminate, there's an inherent bias in how humans operate anyways. These models are developed for a particular bias anyways, if we think about it. They're designed to produce an outcome that meets the requirements, the intent. But you want to avoid unnecessary bias. You want to get to fact-based outputs. And this is where the accuracy comes in, the testing, the human feedback loops, so that you can continuously mitigate any bias that might be inherent in what you've done or unexpected consequences that you didn't intend for a bias to be there.
Excellent points here. And so as we're thinking about AI put into place within the enterprise, as well as developing AI products or AI solutions, these are things that really are important to keep in mind, that it needs to be secure. That seems like such a given, but it's something that we're seeing insecure AI platforms, or maybe not insecure like easily exploitable, but not built in a truly secure manner, that are on the market and being used right now in the enterprise. Something like a ChatGPT comes to mind, which for non-mission critical use cases may be perfectly fine and acceptable. But it's worth thinking about AI with critically important information, private, personally identifiable information, corporate data, things like that. It needs to be held within, what we'll call the four walls of the enterprise. And so this is something that needs to be considered within, within critical use cases such as financial services.
100%.
This is actually even more important for enterprises because the privacy of that data is really important. Their data is their IP. So they never want to have a situation that their data, their human feedback gets used to update any general model that the other competitors are getting the benefit out of it. So it's really important to have that privacy and security around these AI models, not to combine data sets from different enterprises and so on.
I love this topic.
It's a big issue, and it's one that, again, is not discussed a lot. I think ChatGPT has done a great job of creating awareness around what generative AI can do and the potential around it. But similar to what Elham has mentioned before, if you're taking all of this data and putting it into models, you're going to get the hallucinations. You're going to get output that may guide you the wrong way. So you have to then look at the safeguards. And this is where concepts around safe AI really become mission critical. You do need to hold organizations to account for this, including the scientists and the developers and the models, the data, the training, testing. All of that needs to be there. And then you also have to go to the next step to protect the data, because these models are going to be producing outputs that could inadvertently expose data or make biased decisions that you didn't intend simply because of the data that's going in. And in the world of financial services, legal, you can't have those situations. You have to have a level of accuracy. You have to have the safety measures in place. You have to safeguard that data. And one of the points that I think Elham made there was, even within an organization, one group can't share data with another group. And this is part of the reason that I personally like the regulations that are being discussed at the government level, the regulatory bodies. I think they're needed because you do have to hold people to account. And this is where the regulations play a big role.
It's a fascinating point, and something that I think is really important and relevant to this conversation is if we zoom this out a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about AI ethics when developing it and using it. The topic of this discussion more broadly is data ethics as well. So if we zoom this out, how does our understanding of data ethics inform decisions that we make as we're building AI products or implementing AI products within the enterprise?
I could jump in on this one in a broad sense. If we look at the ethical side of data, when you're scouring the internet, as human beings, you can be very biased and scour the internet for information that supports your viewpoint and opinion. A lot of people do that as well. Other people may go and look at a diversity of viewpoints in order to come up with a more objective, informed decision. So that if you look at things subjectively or you look at them objectively, we're inherently introducing a bit of a bias in how we're using information. The same is going to happen when we're looking at the data that's going to feed these models and how these models are going to be processing that data in order to generate an outcome. You have to be very aware of the ethical use of the information that is going to be produced. Some of the cases that we're seeing, because AI is already in play in a lot of places like social media, and the intent around using some of this data is advertising, because they want to target ads to people in order to buy. It's very market economy driven in a lot of cases, but that can force people into loops that generates more bias. I see that when I go into even things like YouTube. It's like, can I get out of this loop? Stop recommending the same thing I looked at just 5 minutes ago. I want to see new and different things. But I know that their algorithms are pretty rudimentary and they're going to be feeding me the same stuff over and over again, which gets very tiring. That, in the world of AI that's coming, can get far worse, and we have to be careful of it. We have to be much more open and diverse around the information that's used and the information that can be viewed by people. If you force people down into a loop, I hate to say it, but it's almost like a brainwashing, and we've talked about this before behind the scenes, is you typically are brainwashing people with feeding them the same information over and over again. And that's the danger I see in AI. And it's the human use of AI. The problem's not with the AI, it's with how humans are using it. And that goes back to the other question, can you trust it? Well, you have to trust the people they're putting together. You have to trust that they're testing it. It's fully audited. As humans, we have a responsibility ourselves to be smart about how we're using the tech.
I also want to add that, like, not only when you're developing an AI, you have to comply with data ethics policies, but also you can actually use AI to ensure that, like, humans are enforcing those policies when they are dealing with data sets. So if you train a model that is specialized on data ethics rules and policies, then that can uh, help the humans, who are, like, all of us are some sort of bias toward, like, something, that can help humans to identify risk associated with, like, misusing a data set. If you're coming up with a new application, like, is it going to have any implications for a subset of groups of people? And we're actually doing that for one of our customers, and it's really exciting to use AI to enforce data ethics for other use cases.
Yeah, I'm glad Elham brought that up because it is phenomenally exciting. I'm ecstatic about some of the results there because it's getting AI to enforce the ethics around it, which is nice because the AI can actually read the policies, it can read the regulations and say, no, hold on a second, your AI is not complying with this, which is exciting because it can eliminate some of the weaknesses we as humans already have and some of the biases we already have and open our eyes a little bit more.
Yes. And that again like comes back to what Kevin said at the beginning, that we need to have 1,000 brains because one of them could be specialized on data ethics policies and can have governance over everything else.
This brings up an interesting point, which is just as business leaders are working to build and to manage diverse teams of people, human people within the teams, we as business leaders can be doing the same thing with technologies used within the organization. It should be diverse, it should be multifaceted, and something that overall supports the overall goals of the enterprise. And having a diverse team and having a diverse technology set or AI with this 1,000 brains model supports that in the same exact way.
Yep. I actually like that term you brought up, multifaceted. I do like that. I'm going to have to inject that into my speak.
Please do. Please do. Wonderful. This is a fascinating topic. I want to move on a little bit to some of the real world implications around AI indoctrination and data ethics, specifically, again, around using AI at work in the enterprise. As we do that, really, some of the things I want to talk about are the challenges that we have seen at Charlie AI related to AI and data ethics while working with our customers, while we're out there speaking to partners, and just understanding how this world is moving so rapidly in the first place, especially over the last, we'll say, 18 to 24 months. We've seen a lot of challenges in the use of AI in business. Let's kind of dive into some of those. The first one that comes to mind for me is what we call the black box of AI. Elham, can you explain to us what that term means when we're saying the black box of AI, and maybe some of the challenges that brings around?
Yes. So most of these AI models, especially like generative AIs, large language models that are huge, um, because of the architecture of them, like it's not easy to understand why they made a decision at the end of the day. So as an outside audience, it looks like a black box. You don't know what's going to come out of it. However, like there are, and this is a challenge, right? When you have something like this, your AI is not explainable. It's not traceable because you don't know based on which piece of information it made that decision. It's not explainable because you don't know why it made that decision. And it comes back to, can you trust AI now if it's not explainable and transparent? There are ways to mitigate that, obviously. Like if you have more smaller models that can communicate with each other, then you have like a better understanding of traceability. You can have some explainability in the process that why the decision was made, and that could mitigate some of these challenges or risk associated with it. However, it's not an easy problem to solve. It's a difficult problem, but it's a very exciting problem to solve for sure.
It is
It's one of those.
the misperceptions I've seen is that a lot of people are looking at the foundational models and they're black boxes. When you're going into very specific real world use cases, financial services, legal, healthcare, you name it, you are going to have to unpack what the models are doing. You are going to have to explain how the models are coming to the decisions and what data they're basing that on. The risks are too great. So it's one thing to write a blog post. It's another to actually go and make a recommendation in the financial world, or a recommendation in the legal world, or a recommendation in the healthcare world. So that black box problem does have to go away. And as Elham pointed out, it's extremely difficult to do that, but it can be done. And we know it can be done. So one of the myths out there is you can't get away from this black box because it's the model and how they operate. That's not true. You can actually go into breaking down where the content came from that informed the model on how the model made the decision. And you can even expose why the model was invoked in the first place in order to create an outcome. So it's very doable to break down that black box.
It requires a coordinated effort, however. It requires I guess the easiest way again to say it is a coordinated effort between developers and users, practitioners, to ensure that these models are broken down and that the transparency and the observability is in fact brought to light. So that is, I'm sure, part of the challenge, specifically as we're thinking about innovation around AI and AI platform development. There's I guess a push and pull, perhaps is one way to say it, between developing new innovative technologies and doing so in an ethical manner. Let's talk about that a little bit, because that is something that is important, but we see this in all kinds of technological and scientific development of, is what's being done right? Is this something that we should be doing? And I know we're talking about that a lot within the world of AI.
I'm just to talk about ethics, I am biased because I've seen a lot of good applications of AI.
Sure.
So is this something we should be doing? I think yes. Are we always approaching it the right way? I'm going to say no. We've always taken the stand that you have to augment human decision making. That means keep the human in the loop. You have to improve humans, so there has to be some guiding principles around that. And that's part of the ethics discussion. The other element around that is, are you applying the AI for the right reasons, the right way? And there's a lot of good applications for it. Just look at healthcare. AI is going to be far more effective at analyzing MRI, CT scans at scale en masse. And that has a lot of benefits downstream for humans. So those are good applications of AI, just around image analysis. If we're looking at it in the world of financial services, you have the ability to apply AI for making faster financial decisions that are more secure, more safe. You can apply AI in order to improve the anti-money laundering capabilities in order to create more safeguards. So the ethics on the application of AI, I think, are good. You have a lot of good use cases that can really ethically benefit everybody. Even from a sustainability perspective, if we're looking at trying to create new innovations for environmental considerations, sustainability, AI has a lot of fantastic applications around it. So I don't want to discourage anybody from looking into this. Again, it's coming back to the human, where the weakness is and what their intent is and how they're going to apply it. And you can have bad actors out there, like everything else that we've seen in history. Bad actors can take tech and apply it the wrong way.
And to avoid that, like we should have some regulations around the use of AI. Definitely, that's something that we need to have. And then maybe for like government to coming up with those regulations, it would be great to get some advices from people who are technical in AI to know exactly what are the type of regulations that you have to enforce, but at the same time to not like put a stop sign for the innovations,
Absolutely. On the topic of regulation, that is something that varies from country to country. What challenges does that put in place or in front of the enterprise? But also, maybe more broadly, what challenges does that put in front of the AI developers? Three that come to mind are there's very large differences around technology regulation in Europe, in Canada, and in the United States. And of course, those are only three areas of, of a world. But the world is flat. Business is done, around the globe. How do we consider that?
If you look at, again, I'm biased. I'll put my bias in there. I love the fact that there's a lot of different regulations, and every region or country is putting in the different regulations. That makes it far more complex for developers to meet those regulations, whether it's privacy regulations, so GDPR, PII, you have a lot of regulations that you have to really consider. The bias in me is that's great because we know how to address that. We work in the world of financial services. Tax mobility is a big issue. People don't understand it, but if you live in New York and you work in California, you've got tax issues in both states. If you reside in the US, but you go overseas and you're working in different regions, you've got tax implications. If you move from one country to another, you've got tax implications. Just dealing with that is an enormous problem. Now, if you layer in the same scope around the data use, data ethics, those really become big issues that developers, scientists have to be aware of. Even simple things like your zip code or your postal code. Zip codes and postal codes can actually create a bias, and you have to be aware of that. Because a zip code, for example, could marginalize a particular group simply because they reside within a zip code to the exclusion of another group. Those are things we have to be well aware of, and regulations across borders is going to be something that everybody's going to have to keep up on.
Also, I want to add that it's not just that the regulation is going to be different from one country to the other. Like in the financial world, the regulations and policies are different from one organization to the other one. Sometimes even from one section of the organization to another section inside the same organization. So as Kevin said, it creates a very complex but exciting problem to solve. And that's where we come in and help the enterprises to overcome this complexity.
Really great points that you both bring up here.
It's a scale factor. I mean, when you're looking at this globally, you have to think in a completely different set of scale. And this is part of the reason that we like the AI, because we're trying to use our own AI to solve problems that we know that we're going to be facing with our customers.
Speaking of customers and speaking of AI, what role do business leaders and AI developers have in ensuring AI is being used ethically or responsibly? One of the first things that comes to mind, we've talked about this at least twice already just on this presentation, is how do we ensure the accuracy of training data and making sure that that is unbiased and making sure it's dependable. For me, that's, I think, the foundational thing around ensuring your AI is used ethically and responsibly is ensuring the data is collected responsibly and it's unbiased at its core.
Yeah. Stepping back a little bit from a responsibility perspective, the regulations are forcing organizations to look at this and forcing the management teams to look at this. So they're now going to have a liability that they're going to have to be well aware of. These new regulations, I'm the CEO of the company, therefore I'm going to have a responsibility to make sure that our AI is acting within regulations and is responsible. And that's going to happen with the financial institutions, healthcare institutions. These regulations are going to force management and directors and officers to be looking at this, which means that they have to look at now auditing their AI. They have to look at having transparency around what they have built so that it can be audited. They're going to have what we know from a technical perspective is lineage. So you have to know the data lineage and how that data is being used in order to train and operate the models. All of that technically is going to have to be exposed, which means new practices, new methodology within a lot of companies.
Excellent.
Well, one point you see up there is keeping the humans involved. And you always want a human in the loop. If it's a black box and it's fully autonomous and off you go and you never look at it again, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. You're going to be a slave to data drift and concept drift as these models continue to operate. You are going to be blind to outcomes that aren't matching what you need. So you will need a human in the loop because you need that reasoning capability. That's what humans have. They have a cognitive capacity, they have a reasoning capability. AI as it is today is not a reasoning machine. They're programmed. They're not even dynamically learning, to go back to what Elham had mentioned earlier. They don't have that dynamic learning ability. They don't have a reasoning that is built into them. So until we get to this point, you do need a human in the loop.
I think that's such an important point, and that's something that makes, I believe, Charlie AI one of these more well-rounded AI platforms. That is our final point on here, is the thought process and the thoughtfulness around the decisions that are being made in developing the product and implementing the product within the enterprise is something that is critically important, I believe, in using AI in general.
Yeah. Actually, just on that point, sorry to belabor this. I know I'm getting on a bit of a soapbox, but one of the things, just as to be more realistic about ourselves, we don't know everything, and we don't know all of the best models to approach. So if you're looking at a well-rounded platform, we know we have to rely on our customers. They're experts on their business, and they have their own models. So how do you take their models and fit it into what decisions are being output by the AI in general? So that means one AI is feeding another AI. And we do work with our customers to incorporate the models that they build or any new models that they want to build themselves.
It's a fascinating point. The last couple of minutes here, I want to talk about how directors, executives within the enterprise, what do they need to know about AI? And this is something that is not necessarily related to data ethics or AI ethics in general, but more broadly. What do leaders need to know about using AI at work?
I can tee this up for Elham to factor in on the complexity of AI. So to get beyond the hype, and the hype, I know Elham knows this about me, it drives me nuts because it's all about Gen AI or generative AI. But there is a lot more to unpack around AI than just Gen AI. And leaders really have to know what it is, what AI means, and just how hard it is to do within an organization.
I 100% agree, Kevin. Just get beyond the hype of generative AI. Like instead, focus on what are the problems, what's the applications that you want the AI to be used for. And in most enterprise use cases, actually, not even focusing it on enterprises, you need a broad range of different types of AI to be satisfying the final request at the end. You need generative AI, you need extractive AI, you need predictive AI, and you need all of these things to work smoothly together to be able to satisfy the final end goal. So instead of focusing on the hype, just focus on what is the application that you want to use AI for. And then let one of these platforms that have all these different elements available to be used for satisfying that use case.
We also want to probably acknowledge that AI tech is evolving so rapidly, and there's a natural, I think, pull to using new technology within the organization. Um, One of the things that we speak about often is you shouldn't just use AI for the sake of using AI, just for what it can do. It should be in support of your overall technology and business strategy and business plan. Because if you're just adding in new tools and new technology for the sake of it, it may actually not be as beneficial to the organization as you think it would be. Can we talk about that for just a moment?
Yeah, we've seen and we've been caught in the trap of just trying to be innovative and do cool stuff. And that consumes a lot of energy. You do learn things from it. It's a great learning experience. But it doesn't mean that you're addressing top of mind issues for a business. It's just cool stuff. It's the cool kid stuff. And I've actually heard that term. Oh, they're just the cool kids. They're going to go play. But the real problem is over here. And this is where, as an executive, you have to look at real problems you need to solve. To go back to what Elham was saying there, you have to have real use cases, real problems. You want to know how you're going to change the business. And this is where it's not enough to just go and say, okay, I want Gen AI because everyone's doing it. It's a hype. You're going to have to look at, if I'm changing my business for the better, I'm going to be cutting costs here, I'm going to be driving revenue there. This is where I need AI to make the biggest impact on my organization. So one of the things that we have done as an organization, when we go and we qualify customer deals, because it's a bit of two-way exchange with customers, we have got into the position now of just give us your hard problem. We don't want the easy problem, because the easy problem is going to be a so what at the end of the day. It's going to be that cool kid thing. Okay, that's cool, but so what? We want real hard problems to solve that haven't been able to solve with legacy technology. Even lightweight machine learning hasn't been able to solve it. We've been able to do it with what we call true AI, but it's that complex thousand brains. We want the hard problems to solve because we will know that will have the biggest impact on the business. Bottom line, top line.
Fantastic.
One thing that I want to add is just that, like, as you mentioned, this technology is rapidly evolving, right? So whatever solution, whatever strategy you're going to come up with, it has to be flexible. It's just because, like, the solution that you might be useful today, or like the models that you might think that I'm going to use it today, a year from now, I guarantee that there are going to be better models available. So you have to be easily be able to switch from one to the other. Also, like, the problem, like all the problems that we have, again, like, are dynamic. So you shouldn't rely on static strategies or static solutions, because like the models are going to evolve. The problem itself is going to evolve over time. We have this concept of data drift and so on. So definitely you have to look into dynamic solution. And when we say that, it means that, like, there needs to be a human in the loop always, to be able to continuously update that solution, to be able to continuously not only update the model, but also update, like, the way that we use AI.
Excellent points. I want to wrap it at this because I know we can continue to talk, but I feel like we've really, kind of put a bow on this topic and conversation quite well today. So, Kevin and Elham, I want to thank you for going through, diving pretty deep on some of these topics around data ethics, around AI ethics, and AI indoctrination, and overall, just educating and informing our audience a bit more about things that we think about and talk about every single day as we're building Charlie AI. So thank you to Kevin and Elham. Thank you for everybody who's watched this, and you can learn more at our website. It's charlie.ai. You can find a bunch of information about our AI use cases that support the enterprise financial services world, and request a demo on there.